Imagine missing your flight and never really leaving the airport again. Not for a night, not for a week, but for 18 years. For nearly 2 decades, passengers passing through Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris kept seeing the same strange sight. A quiet man sitting on a red bench, surrounded by bags, newspapers, and small personal belongings, living in the airport as if it were his home. His name was Mehran Karimi Nasseri, but over time, he began calling himself Sir Alfred. And the deeper people looked into his story, the stranger it became. In August 1988, Mehran Karimi Nasseri arrived at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. He was in his early 40s, soft-spoken, and carrying luggage filled with his belongings. His goal was simple. He wanted to travel to the United Kingdom. According to the story he told for years, he was trying to reach Britain to search for his biological mother. But when he landed at Heathrow Airport in London, everything went wrong. At immigration, he could not present the documents the officers needed. He claimed his papers had been stolen, so instead of entering the UK, he was detained and sent straight back to Paris. And that is where his strange life began. When he returned to Charles de Gaulle, French authorities faced a bizarre problem. They could not simply let him walk into France without proper identification, but they also could not easily deport him because his legal situation was unclear and he lacked the documents needed to prove exactly where he belonged. So technically, he could remain in the airport's international transit area. That meant he wasn't really inside France in the normal sense, but he also wasn't free to travel. He was stuck in a strange kind of legal limbo, and for the moment, he had nowhere else to go. At first, maybe it felt temporary. Maybe he believed it would only take a few days or a few weeks to fix. But days became weeks, weeks became months, and months became years. Inside Terminal 1, Nasseri slowly built a routine. He slept on a red bench in the pre-departure lounge, washed in the airport bathrooms, woke up early before crowds filled the terminal, read newspapers for hours, smoked his pipe, and even kept notes and wrote constantly. Airport employees began to know him by sight. Some workers gave him food, especially from places like McDonald's. Others offered clothes, toiletries, meal vouchers, and small acts of kindness. Travelers passed him every day, most of them in a rush, each heading somewhere else. Home, work, vacation, reunions. While this one man remained in the same place, watching the world move without him. Over time, he became part of the airport itself, not just a stranded passenger, a fixture. As his story spread, more people tried to help. An airport doctor named Philippe Barguin took an interest in his case. A lawyer named Christian Bourget also got involved and spent years trying to sort out his legal mess. And for a while, the public saw Nasseri as a symbol of how cold and confusing borders and bureaucracy could be. Letters arrived for him, people sent money, journalists wrote about him, supporters followed his situation from afar. But as the years passed, another question slowly became impossible to ignore. Who exactly was this man? And was the story he told actually true? According to Nasseri's own version of events, he came from an affluent family in Iran. He said his father was a doctor, and that after his father's death, he discovered a painful family secret that the woman he had believed was his mother was not actually his biological mother. He also claimed after political involvement in protests, he was arrested, tortured, expelled from Iran, and eventually granted refugee status. This story became the foundation of the identity he presented to the world. But over time, cracks started to appear. Some parts of his past were difficult to verify. Some were challenged by people who investigated his background. And as years passed, Nasseri himself began changing the details of who he said he was. He didn't just tell a story, he began reinventing himself inside the airport. At some point, Mehran Karimi Nasseri began introducing himself as Sir Alfred. It reportedly started after a letter addressed him that way by mistake, but he embraced it completely, and this was not just a nickname. He increasingly rejected the identity of the man who had entered the airport in 1988. He insisted on speaking English, leaned into a British persona. He surrounded himself with newspaper clippings and letters that reinforced the myth growing around him. To outsiders, Sir Alfred was tragic, mysterious, and unforgettable. But to the people trying hardest to help him, this transformation became a nightmare. Because once identity becomes the problem, even recovered documents may no longer solve anything. After years of effort, lawyer Christian Bourget eventually managed to recover papers connected to Nasseri's case. This should have been the breakthrough. This should have been the moment the story ended. Because now, at last, there was a way for him to move forward. But instead of accepting the papers, he refused them, because they identified him as Mehran Karimi Nasseri, born in Iran, not Sir Alfred, not British, not the person he had become. That moment changed the entire meaning of his story. Up to that point, many people believed the airport was simply a prison created by missing paperwork. But now it looked like something else. It looked like the airport had become his refuge, a place where he no longer had to be the man he had once been. When asked why he wouldn't leave, his answer was startling. He said, "By the 1990s and early 2000s, Sir Alfred had become internationally famous. Documentary filmmakers came to meet him. Journalists interviewed him. Artists were inspired by him. And eventually, Hollywood noticed. Steven Spielberg's film The Terminal, starring Tom Hanks, was loosely inspired by Nasseri's life. The movie turned the situation into a softer, more accessible story, but the real man was more difficult to understand, because the truth was not just about bureaucracy, it was about identity. By then, Nasseri had reportedly received a large sum of money connected to the film rights to his story. He also later published an autobiography titled Terminal Man. So by this point, the problem was no longer just a lack of resources. He had money, had attention, and he had recovered documents, and still, he stayed. That's what made his story so haunting. People trapped by systems usually want out, but what if, after enough years, the prison becomes part of the self? What if leaving means becoming someone you no longer wish to be? In 2004, a filmmaker named Paul Bertzeller reportedly contacted Nasseri's family in Iran. According to that investigation, some of Nasseri's relatives had tried to see him years earlier, but he refused to recognize them. Other parts of his personal history were also disputed, including major parts of the origin story he had repeated for years. By then, many people had come to believe that Nasseri was not simply trapped by governments. He was also trapped by the identity he had constructed inside the airport. Mehran Karimi Nasseri may have had a path out, but Sir Alfred did not, and Sir Alfred was the one who now lived on the red bench. By 2006, he had spent 18 years inside Charles de Gaulle Airport. Think about that for a second. 18 years of flight announcements. 18 years of strangers. 18 years of watching other people leave. He watched the world change from one terminal. Fashion changed, technology changed, governments changed, entire eras passed. And still he remained there, almost frozen in place. But in July 2006, the story finally shifted. Nasseri suffered a medical emergency and was taken from the airport by ambulance. For the first time in many years, he was forced to leave. After treatment, he did not return immediately to live in the terminal as before. He later stayed in shelters and other accommodations in France. His long residence inside the airport had finally ended. The red bench was cleared. The strange little world he had built inside Charles de Gaulle disappeared. And yet, even after all that, the story still did not end cleanly. In one final twist, years later, Nasseri reportedly returned to Charles de Gaulle Airport again. And in 2022, he died there. That ending feels almost impossible to write. After everything, the legal struggle, the fame, the reinvention, the years of waiting, the movie, the money, the attention, the airport remained the central place in his life. So what was Sir Alfred really? A victim of bureaucracy? A man damaged by trauma? Someone who found safety in a place where identity could stay suspended? Or someone who slowly chose the strange comfort of limbo over the uncertainty of freedom? Maybe he was all of those things. What makes this story unforgettable is not just that a man lived in an airport for 18 years. It's that somewhere along the way, the airport stopped being a temporary place. It became a life. It became an identity. And perhaps in the end, it became the only home he truly believed was his.